Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Muharram Special with your host, Zinat. Today in the studio, we have a very special guest from United States of America, Sister Alima Maryam Muaddal. Assalamu alaikum, sister. How are you?
Walaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Sister, please introduce yourself.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. My name is Maryam Muaddal. I am an American Iranian. I'm from LA. I graduated in a business degree in accounting from Cal Poly Pomona. I taught at an Islamic school for about a year and a half, and then I moved to Qom in Iran, and I've been studying at Jamiat al-Zahra. I've been studying Islamic philosophy. I finished my bachelor's, and currently I'm finishing up my master's, inshallah.
Thank you so much, sister, for being part of this studio. And today, before we start the question and answer, I would request you to speak out your poetry that you actually have made, like in a spoken English words, spoken words. Yeah, if you can, because that poetry is related to the struggle, Imam Hussein, and so many things that's coming from your heart. That's actually inspired by your marhum, like the deceased brother.
Yeah.
If you could speak out the poetry, please.
Yeah. So this poem I wrote after he passed away, and it's about how struggles can make a person stronger. So I'll start, and it's called The Rose, by the way. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Going through story after story, tale after tale, hardships, hearing them as well, I learned that life never gives you a rose without thorns pricking your finger, and oh boy, how it can hurt sometimes. But in return, the fragrance of that flower can smell ever so sweet. فَإِنَّمَا الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا, that with every hardship comes ease. Believe me, I've been there. That dark tunnel of ever seemingly endless struggles, that place where the sky seems to be falling upon you all of a sudden, and all hopes are gone, yet a light within flickers. A destiny is written. The angels witness the rise of man over their own nafs. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ. The dawn has broke. Man has seek refuge in Allah. It's a miracle, subhanallah. The water gushes in through. That hard work that couldn't be broken, their light shines in through. Those hardships finally broke you, yet the angels could never imagine. Today's miracle is a miracle of the repentant servant. A child is born after a hard day's labor, born again in faith, achieve light, a heart full of basira. Kindness and compassion that wasn't there. You see, istighfar isn't just a dhikr, it's a way of life, going back, turning around to the one who he came from. Man has reached a new realm of light, one he was blind to. He had eyesight in the world and was blind in the other, yet all together, and now he's reached eternal vision. And the cycle continues. Once again, another tawaf, nurun ala nur, light upon light, and his journey continues. All of a sudden, all those hardships make sense. Those things that weren't clear to you, those hardships weren't a torture, yet a blessing in disguise. As Zainab Salamullah says, وَمَا رَأَيْتُ إِلَّا جَمِيلًا, that I have not seen anything but beauty. I learned that life never gives you a rose without thorns pricking your finger, and oh boy, how it can hurt sometimes. But in return, the fragrance of that flower can smell ever so sweet. Guess where that rose came from? Of course, it came from paradise.
Subhanallah, sister, that was really, really very beautiful. This is something like really touched your heart.
Yeah.
Going from the poetry, because this is the time of poetry. This is the month of Muharram.
Yeah.
This is the month of Imam Hussein, the spiritual month that we can explain the Muslims and the non-Muslim why the tragedy of Karbala has happened.
Yeah.
Going to the first question, what do we learn from the event of Karbala?
Right. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaykum ya Aba Abdullah wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, if we look at the story of Karbala, we see there's so many dimensions to it. You can look at it from a social aspect. You can look at it from a political aspect. You can look at it from a family aspect. There's just so many dimensions. You can look at it from the sense of being an ubudiyya, like an abd of Allah, the servant of Allah, the relationship between Abu Abdullah and Allah, the relationship of Abu Abdullah, Imam Hussein, between his companions, the relationship with him and the enemy, the relationship with him and his family. All these things are different dynamics. And so there's so many lessons. I don't think we can ever count them, but inshallah we can cover a few of them. So one of the things that I was thinking about this, and it was one aspect, is that in the story, in the middle of the battle, Imam Hussein stops and recognizes it's time for prayer, and he actually assembles the Jama'at prayer, right? And you know the story where Imam Hussein leads the prayer. He has a few, like one or two people who protect him. Yeah. And they actually die in the process of, they become a martyr from the process of protecting Imam Hussein and the companions. Yet he still does this. And it just shows how important prayer is and how important it is to uphold that. And I kind of want to give some examples, because at the end of the day, what's important to take from this is to learn from these stories, learn from the actions of Imams and apply it to our life, if it goes into the aspect of actions, right? So like I remember me and my sister were going to Hajj. This is like years ago, and we were flying from Tehran to, I think it was Jeddah. And I remember we were in the plane, we're on the top floor. And so because we were on the top floor, we were at the beginning of the plane. And so the aisles it was one aisle, and then it became split and became two. And so it was more, the time came for salat, like morning salat, like Fajr prayer. And so, you know, I assumed like people would just go, and they had like a room because it was an Iranian flight. I thought people would just go into the room and pray because they had like a prayer room. But then I saw like our group leader, he stood up, and they said, let's do Jama'at prayer. And he, wow, in a plane. Yeah. So it was really awesome. So like he stood in the front because it was one line, one aisle, and became two. So people literally stood one by one. And then as the aisle split, people stood behind. So it was like two lines in a plane, which was, yes, I've never imagined to do Jama'at prayer I mean, it's already difficult to do prayer in a plane. In a plane, yes. It's kind of,
and you're doing a Jama'at on a plane.
And doing Jama'at, I was just like, wow. Like when I saw that, I was like, okay, we have no excuse not to do Jama'at prayer in like normal circumstances. Yes. If people can do it in a plane, yeah, it's possible to do it in everywhere else. So that really, it wasn't a lesson for me. And we take that Abu Abdullah to be our role model in this. And so like whether we're on a plane, whether we're, you know, in our jobs at university, at school, we always can do this.
Yes.
And when it comes to planes, what I've learned is when they're Muslim, like if it's a Muslim Airlines, it's normal to ask to pray. Like, yes, I know with like Emirates, like just like, oh, I need to pray, and they'll be like, yeah, I can go in the back. Like they always toward the end of the plane, they'll just like let you pray there. Mm-hmm. With like I don't know, Lufthansa or like these non-Muslim, yes, airlines, they'll just be like, okay, so how long is it going to take? And you're like, oh, 10 minutes tops. And they're like, yeah, go ahead, you know. So like, as long as it's not like landing time or when you're when you're supposed to put on your seatbelts, they'll let you. And so it's just asking. People usually they allow you, so we shouldn't be afraid of that. Also, like when it comes down to when we're at schools, it's important to recognize like we have the right to ask to be able to pray. But if you're living in America, it's our right. It's fundamentally our right based on the Constitution. I remember like when I was in high school, it was during Ramadan. It was the last Friday of Ramadan. I remember this. And it was my senior year. And I was taking economics AP. And I asked my teacher, I was like, can I go pray? And he said no. And I was really upset. Like that really hurt me because I was like, oh, it's like Friday. It's the last week of Ramadan, you know. But I didn't say anything. And so what happened was the week after he came back to me and he's like, I apologize for that. I talked to the principal and they told me that you're allowed to ask to pray whenever you want. Mm-hmm. And you have that right. And so it really taught me like, hey, like you should ask for your rights. Like it doesn't matter. You know, you shouldn't be shy about it. If we want, and establishing prayer at the beginning of time is really something that's really, really recommended. Yeah. So when we have that option, we should try to do it as much as we can. Even when I was in university, like sometimes like classes are really long. Sometimes you have like 3-hour classes and then you have another class. So you really don't have time in between. So I would just sometimes get up in between the class and just go out, pray, and come back. Even in the exam, I would have exams, I would get up and go and pray and come back. And it's just so possible. And sometimes people think it's not, they feel uncomfortable or whatever. It's like, no, you can do this. I remember with our MSA, they used to have like a specific spot under the flagpole, and that's where like we all knew like the MSA would pray, would do Jamaat prayer there. So it's possible, and I think when you come together as like a group, it makes it easier because like you're in a group, you don't feel as you feel more comfortable.
Yeah. So basically, the first message that you're saying that what we learn is like do your prayers on time because Imam Hussein was in the middle of the war.
Yeah.
He was in Karbala, but still he stood up for Salat, and he knew that they are not going to let him pray. Because they say, oh, you're a non-believer, we don't accept your prayers. And they attacked him. But still they were protectors trying to protect him so that he can pray. So even during that difficult situation of people are not letting you pray, still he prayed. He was an example.
Yeah.
So while we go to work or anywhere else, we can just pray. This is the first example.
This is the first example. I want to give more examples just because I want to show like it doesn't matter where you are, you can still do this. So I remember like in my science, I was a TA in my science class. So like I remember when I told her, that specific teacher, she was like, oh yeah, like of course go do your prayer. And she was like, do you need anything? Do you need chairs? So it's like sometimes people are even nice about it. They're really understanding. So it's take advantage of that. And like also like when you're at your job and you're working, I worked at an accounting firm, and my boss knew like during a certain time like I go pray, and they understand that, and we're just like, okay, like I just need 10-15 minutes and that's it, right? And I would always do wudu at home, so I already had that. You can kind of do that beforehand, right? So it takes less time from you, and if you just kind of explain it to them like, hey, I have to pray. And it's usually when we work, it's only like for Dhuhr and Asr that we need to go and pray. Like for morning Salat Fajr, for Salat and Maghrib and Isha, usually we're at home. So it's not a problem. So it's just like that specific time. Or like you can just say like, okay, during my lunch break, you can do that, right? Mm-hmm. So if it's like, oh, you're taking time away from work, you can say like, okay, I want to take my lunch break during my Salat time so I can like pray my prayer time. Also, like another place I've done a lot of times I had to pray was like in parking lots, because like you might be shopping or something, or you're out, right? And so like I've done it. I had done it so much that I didn't care anymore about what if people saw me, because usually it's kind of like, oh, how are people going to react? But I mean, I think there's videos out there where people are like praying in public, and people think they're doing yoga. So it's not really much, and people actually start following them, their movements. So like,
people know that you're praying.
Some
it's very
people
common,
do, some people don't. It's like because you're dealing with non-Muslims here, right?
Yeah.
So like it's fine. I've just like honestly, like if you do it so many times, at one point you won't care. And I remember once, like I was in this part, so I prayed. I got back, like I was getting in my car, and then all of a sudden this truck pulls up, and this is this guy, like he had all tattoos everywhere, and he's like, thank you so much for praying. And I'm like, what? Like I was so confused, but he was like thanking me for praying. I was just like, I'm so proud of you, and like he wasn't Muslim, he didn't look like he was Muslim, and he was just thanking me, and I was just like, okay, but like, so like I've even had reactions like that which were interesting. So I think it's possible to do prayer anytime, like anywhere basically, and also not anytime, like, and we should be doing it in the proper time, but like any place that we are. And then also like, I think one thing that me and my family would do sometimes is when we were traveling, we would try to find the masjid or the center there, and like pray there, right? Because it's mustahab to pray in the masjid. So if you have that opportunity, I mean, right now with COVID, I know it's difficult, but like if let's say if we were in normal times, like, okay, if you're traveling around, like it's an option to like try to see if you can find the center, like that's open, and pray there. And you can find other Muslim brothers and sisters who you can pray with. So I think that's a good option. Yeah,
so that's like one of the message. And what would be like other message apart from that?
So another aspect of it is like, as I said, there's different dimensions to it. Another aspect is that the relationship that Imam had with his family and his followers. And so if you look at it, the relationship he had was, they loved him.
Yeah.
His daughters were, they loved him so much. Like in Farsi we say ashaq budan. Like they would do anything for him, right? Because they loved him so much. And obviously, our relationship like that just doesn't happen over doing nothing. Like it happens through people acting toward each other in a certain way, right? It's through being kind and loving to other people. And you see the way his story with Zainab, right? Like when in the story is before they get to the land of Karbala, Imam Hussein falls asleep and he wakes up and he says that like, okay, the Prophet told me like I'm going to join him soon. And Hazrat Zainab like gets upset. She slaps her and Imam Hussein calms her down. She's like, sister, like calm down. You have to be patient. We have, and then there's also like the part of the story where when Imam Hussein is in the battlefield, he's the last one who's left, and he's battling. He's in the battle and he's fighting. In the midst of the battle, he comes back to Hazrat Zainab, and it was because of what Fatima Zahra had told Hazrat Zainab, that like to kiss Imam Hussein's neck, right? And it was something that Hazrat Fatima had told Hazrat Zainab to do as like in her will. And you see that in this, like, it shows like the love that this family has for each other, and the understanding of this need of showing that love and showing that compassion. It's amazing, and you see like the relationship he has with his daughters. Like his daughters don't want to let him go when he's leaving. He's saying goodbye. His last word, they're like clinging on to him, and Hazrat Zainab has to come and kind of like separate them and to allow him to go. So the thing is, like, obviously it was his kindness and the compassion he had. And sometimes, unfortunately, we see with religious individuals, sometimes when we think of religious individuals, we immediately think people who are harsh. Sometimes, like the stereotype is that like people who are very harsh. Yet when we look at Imam Hussein, when we look at the Ahlul Bayt, we see that no, they're extremely kind people. They were loving. They're within their families. They were like glued together. They loved each other so much.
When he announced that he's going to be departing for Medina, there were people who came up and said, "We are going to come with you."
Yeah.
He never told people, "Come with me." The Bani Hashmi tribe, the people who said, "We are going to join you," the people who joined him, they joined him with their own love. They had so much love for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, including the entire family. Not only men, there were women and kids. They said, "We are going to join you."
Yeah.
So this is the love that he showed to them, that they are showing him back.
Definitely. And so what I want to like just discuss a little bit today is that how can we practice this? Because it's easy to say just love people, but a lot of times we don't say, well, when it comes down to acting upon it, that's where we kind of struggle.
Yeah.
And so there's a book called The 5 Love Languages. It's by Gary, I think it's Garvey Chapman or Gary Chapman, if I'm not mistaken. And he says that there's 5 love languages. There's touch, words, doing actions, spending time, and gifts. Okay, so I'll kind of explain each and every one of them. So like touch is like when you like to express love or receive love by hugging someone, by kissing someone, by touching, right? Touchy feel. And for each person, this can manifest differently. Like someone might have that love language, but they might pinch someone, or they might like wrestle with someone. Like depending on the person, it will show differently. Sometimes a person's love language could be it could be words. So they love to express Azizam, I love you, like dear, my love, sweetheart, honey. Like right, honey. So that's the way they want to express love, and that's how they want to receive love.
Yeah.
Another one is doing actions. So like some people show their love in a way that they do things. So it might be cleaning for someone, it may be cooking a good meal, it could be cleaning the garage, it could be, I don't know, like it could be so many different things. Or it might be for like a woman, for her husband, like she might dress up, right, or put on makeup or something. So that's something you do for someone else. The fourth one is spending time. So like the way we're spending time with each other here could be like a expression of love, or just spending time with each other, talking on the phone, going to the park going to the park with each other, walking, taking a walk together, just spending time with each other. That's another one. And the last one is giving gifts. Now, gifts are easy, right?
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be expensive. Sometimes you can just make something. It could be in different forms, right? Like you can make something, you can buy something. It doesn't have to be expensive. You can pick a flower and give to someone, it could be in different aspects. Now, what's important is to recognize within this 5, people have usually two of these love languages that they typically express more, and they want to receive in that way. So what's important is that when it comes to family members, is that you recognize what their love language is. Like what is their favorite too, and it's usually the way they express love to other people is what they want to receive. So what's important is that when you're dealing with someone else, you give them love in the language they want to receive. Because if you give them love in other languages, like in the other forms, like was it spending gifts or spending time or giving gifts or whatever, they'll feel love, but not as much if you do it in that language they want to. And so if you, there's also like a test online you can try taking. So you can take it yourself and so see what your love language. You can also give this to your family members. If it's your spouse, it's your son, your daughter, your parents, whoever. You can ask them to take it, or you can kind of pay attention and figure out what it is. And it's something like I personally tried doing because I wanted to see if it would work. I remember I was spending time with my mom, and I decided I'm going to pick one of her love languages and just keep on showing to her within 1 month and see the difference. So so hers was doing things for others, people. So that month I would always, unload the dishwasher, load the dishwasher, doing all these little things that I could.
Just helping her.
Just helping her out, doing things for her. I try to do that. And I saw a huge difference. Like when you do that and you make it a goal, be like, okay, I want to make my relationship with like my spouse or my daughter or my son or whoever better, and you keep doing that, you'll see a difference. And first of all, you become kinder as a person because you're constantly giving love in that thing. But then also that person also feels loved and they reciprocate. So it'll change your relationship with whoever. So for like people who are struggling with their parents, or if you're struggling with whatever relationship, if it's your daughter, your son, with your sister, your brother, your parents, whoever, try doing this, and it really will work. Because what happens was that we all have tension, like we all have moments where we will kind of butt heads with each other.
Yes.
But if you practice this, what happens is that it makes those moments easier. And in between, like when you're like, for example, having a discussion, it gets a little bit heated, but like you turn around and just show, like let's say their love language is words. Like you say, oh, Azizam, or like, oh, my love, or whatever, that in itself will make it easier to deal with you because you're showing them love and they're like, okay, well, this person really cares about me. Well, let me try to see if I can work it out. So it becomes easier to handle them. And I think this is a very, very practical way to make it easier. And also, like when it comes down to family members, like when you do this and you practice this, your children will pick it up.
Yes.
It's very interesting. So I was babysitting two of my two kids. It was my friend's kids. And so it was like, the boy was like 4 years old. The girl was like 6 months or whatever. And I would call the little girl like Azizam, which means my love in Farsi. I would say sweet words to her. And it's funny because after I'd left, my friend messaged me. She's like, yeah, I caught my son, Mohammed, his name was, calling Fatima, Azizam. And I looked at him and I'm like, do you even know what that means? And he's like, yeah, it means my love. And I saw, like, and she's like, who did you learn this from? And she's like, from Khala Maryam. And so she just learned it from me being expressive. And it's really like this showing of love is something that we can learn from our family members. And so if you're doing this, it also teaches your children to love your people around you and be kind to them. And it has an effect. And he was 4 years old and he picked it up.
Yes.
So it has a huge effect. And I think this is really important. It's something that we can learn from Imam Hussein. And hopefully we can do that.
Yes.
Inshallah. So, and hopefully, like, when it comes to parents, like, I really did want to talk about parents in one episode about how to be able to make the relationship better. And so if you try this technique, it hopefully will help and, inshallah, strengthen your relationship with them. Okay, so for the next one, in terms of the things that we can learn from within the messages or the
first one was definitely offering your salat on time.
Yeah.
Second one was like showing love. You know, how you can be within your family, with your husband and wife, with your kids and everything. This is the second point.
Yeah.
Are you going on the third one now?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think one big, huge lesson we can learn is selflessness. That Imam Hussein basically gave everything. Like there was nothing there that he did not give for Allah.
He gave his family.
Yeah, he gave up everything. I mean, you think about it. He gave up his sons, he gave up his companions, he gave up his own life, and then he put his daughters and the women in his camp, basically in danger. They were made prisoners. So like he gave up everything, and this selflessness is something that you definitely see, and not just with Imam Hussein, but like also with Abul Fazl Abbas, with Zainab, with the daughters, with all of them. It was just like they really, they gave up everything for Imam Hussein, and Imam Hussein gave up everything for Allah.
Yes.
And so like when it comes to these majlises, it's like that's one of the things that it creates is this selflessness. It breaks the ego. It breaks this I that we have, this thing that it's constantly like, what about me? What about me? It's like, no. When you come to the majlis of Imam Hussein, it's like, well, what about Imam Hussein? It's not about me anymore. It's not about you anymore. It's about, okay, all we are saying is, Ya Aba Abdullah, labbaik ya Hussein, right? We're like, oh, Imam Hussein, we're here for you. We've got your back. We wish we were there. We want to be there. We want to be in your camp. If we were there, we would be. If we were there in the 61st year of Hijrah, we would be in your camp, inshallah, right? That's what we're trying to say here. And that's the beauty of it, is that with the story of Karbala, it brings us to the table. And it doesn't matter how old are you. It doesn't matter if you're 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to an old man or old lady. We all can be in that camp and say like, oh, Imam Hussein, we love you. And it's really through this love, right? Because people love Imam Hussein, they love the Ahlul Bayt, they love Abul Fazl Abbas because of his bravery, his kindness, because he fought the enemy till the last drop of blood he had. He lost 2 of his arms, he was still trying to get water to the camp, right? So these stories are so inspirational, and it brings that aspect. That aspect is in the story, then it brings this aspect to us, the selflessness.
Exactly. And each and every person in that camp had a beautiful story.
Exactly.
When you're talking about your Abdullah, he lost his 2 of the arms, but still he wanted to go with his, like, holding it from his tongue, you know. And then came the story of Imam Ali Asghar, who was like 6 months old, an infant baby, you know, how he gave up his life. And Bibi Sakina, salamullah alayha, I think she's the most intelligent girl. She's the leader of all the kids. You know, this girl who was so thirsty, who goes to her uncle asking for water for herself and the other kids. You know, all the kids are thirsty. And when she goes over there, and when the news of her uncle comes that he's no more, she never asked for water. This is like, whatever our age was, according to some narration, this is the age, that is, but she was a kid. When a kid wants water, that means, they want water, how they go to their parents. But this is the most intelligent kid, she never complains for water. So every character was very inspiring, especially when I think about these ladies of the camp. Bibi Rubab Salamullah Alayha, who had like lost both of her babies, and there were other ladies, there were so many, like 52 women and children, they were all thirsty, they were all hungry, they were all changed, they were all like taken like a captive. But still they never retreated, and they were seeing dead bodies in front of their eye. That means those ladies and children were really courageous. They were very, very strong. There are many people we don't even know the names, right? We don't even know so many unpopular people. But definitely a biggest inspiration is they are very courageous.
Definitely. So I think that's a huge aspect too, the story of Karbala and the roses in general, the story of Karbala. When we shed tears, it really breaks the ego. And I think as a collective society, it softens our hearts, it softens that rigidness that we have with each other, because when we tend to work with each other, this ego kind of stands out and makes it hard for us to work with each other. But when we come under the banner of Imam Hussein and we cry, that softens a bit and makes it easier to work with each other. And so that's like, it's really a miracle in the sense where like the tears, and that there's a reason why there's so much thawab and there's so much reward for these tears, is because the effect of it, it's so strong within the hearts and within our souls.
So basically when we use the word isar, that the self-sacrifice which is made for the sake of your fellow sister or your brother, you sacrifice yourself, you put yourself in difficulties and problems just so that the other person gets a